When I was younger, every year for Christmas, I would drive upstate to my aunt's house along a stretch of highway. And I just cannot for the life of me remember the name of the road. All I know is that it runs nearby Akron and Y at some point. However, most of the drive is through rural areas with little to no towns nearby. But anyway, it was the dead of night, and my groggy self had gotten off my long shift and had to drag my butt to my aunt's house since my extended family was expecting me the following morning. Near halfway through the drive, I realized that I was low on gas, which irritated me. My brother told me that he had filled it up the day before, so he either forgot or was straight up lying, but I saw some sort of an archaic-looking sign for a gas station off the next road. It wasn't an official road sign or anything, literally a pole with a slab of metal attached with gas off next exit, or something along those lines painted on anyway. And although it seemed a little sketchy, people do the same thing with fruit stands on highways, so whatever. I pulled off the next exit on some dilapidated country road through dense woods, and to be honest, the whole thing was sort of creepy and surreal. I kept expecting Leatherface to come running out of the trees with a chainsaw at any moment, but eventually I came to the gas station, thankfully, and realized quickly that it hadn't been open for years. It was all rusted, and the convenience store's roof was caving in. Gas pumps had all been taken out as well. I pulled over next to it and I checked my gauge. I would probably only make it another half mile before running out, so I called ADODA and they said that they'd send a truck over as quickly as they could, and now I played the waiting game. I left my engine on because when the headlights were off, everything was absolutely pitch black, and my paranoid self wasn't sitting next to an abandoned gas station in the middle of a forest in complete darkness. So most of the wait went pretty uneventful, I suppose, until I sensed movement around the side of the old store where my lights pointed. I look up, but I didn't see anything more, so I just sort of looked back down at my phone. Then over the sounds of the night, I hear someone yell, "Hey buddy, come over here," in a sort of demanding tone. I look up and I kid you not, there's a dude standing by the old store just looking towards me, illuminated by my headlights. He looked like a run-of-the-mill sort of homeless guy, I suppose. I was honestly pretty spooked out and figured that he must have been squatting there or something. I'm still watching him. I rolled down my window and I yelled something like, "Yeah, what's up?" Still mentally terrified. I had my foot ready to floor it out of there at the first sign of trouble, in fact, but he said, "You got any change?" And I said, "Nah, I don't. Sorry, man." I look up at him and he has this kind of vacant expression and he's just standing sort of completely stiff. And then I see more movement. There are heads, about 20 or so heads in fact, peeking around the trees beyond the man that I'm talking to. I can't see them clearly at all, but they're definitely people. Literally just heads staring in my direction from around the trees. I see another guy beginning to walk from around the gas station, and that was enough for me. I turned around as quickly as I could and I just sped off. I got as far away from that place as my tank would carry me, and I updated AAA on my location. The driver came back over and filled me up and I didn't say anything, but after he left I wanted to call the cops, so I called the nearest town's sheriff department, and they said that they would send a trooper over and I gave them the location. When I got to my aunt's house, they called me back and said that whoever was there was now gone, but they could tell that a large number of people had actually been living there for quite a while. Blankets, canned food, the usual stuff like that. The whole situation still freaks me out to this day. But frankly, I suppose I could consider myself lucky that I'll always have such a creepy story to tell, but I'm just glad that nothing bad happened. I grew up in a cookie-cutter suburban housing neighborhood in Southern California, but one of those ones in like the early 2000s that literally every single house was the same plan and looked exactly the same on the outside. I moved there from the city of Los Angeles in the middle of school, and man, I hated it. And by the time that I was in 10th grade, I had left school and was in a homeschool program that gave me a lot of free time. The town felt cultish to me due to its extreme religious citizens, Mormon and Christianity, because I'd never been exposed to intense religion before. Note too that I have nothing against these religions. It was just so far removed from my background that I was out of my element. But the event that I'm describing, it takes place in 2013. So my house was located on the last lot of the development, and beyond us was beautiful 100 old oak trees, hiking trails, and a lot of natural wildlife. I spent a lot of time climbing trees and just playing in there too. I had a favorite tree, in fact, that I would walk past to get to the center of town often, and one day I decided to build a tree house and a tire swing on it. It was right off a trail that was very popular to get to the schools and other places too. So I thought that it would be used a lot and was happy to share it with anyone passing by. I built the tree house in about maybe 2 weeks and then started on the tire swing. But when I was setting up the tire swing, I stepped on this patch of land that was just extremely spongy. This meant in my mind that it was probably hollow, right? And something was probably buried underneath it, so I dug it up and dug some more, and I found this Ziploc plastic sandwich bag with like yellow-white crust inside. I didn't open it. I thought that it was trash that had food inside of it at one time, so I just put it in my bag and threw it away at my house. The next day I returned to finish my project. Again, I stepped on more hello ground though, and I decided to dig some more, and man, I found some really weird stuff. I dug for a while and I found another Ziploc plastic sandwich bag with the same stuff as before, but this bag, it looked too new to be buried so far into the earth like that, so I knew that it had to have been buried recently. I tossed it aside though and kept digging, and then I found a plastic sealed pack of pages with writing on them. Water had leaked into the bag, so the ink was smeared, but it just looked like pages from a small child's diary with scribbles and pictures. It was odd, I admit, but I kept digging, and then I found another bag with 1980s pornography that had been printed out from an old website. The watermark said 2000, but there was like water damage on that too. I then found a bag with old family photos that looked to be around the same era of 2000 or 2002 or something. The photos were of a white family and all normal photos of people at a dinner table, a birthday party, a sea ward, same children, 2 girls and a boy, same mom and dad too. I kept digging and I found another bag of that crusty white yellow stuff in a bag. Under that bag were some children homework sheets, and under that was another white yellow crusty bag. Now I had no idea what to do with all this, obviously. I didn't want these things, but there were only a few photos of the pornography, and they all had some sort of water damage because it was on computer paper. But the only thing that was untouched were the family photos because it was in film prints. So in the end, I just decided that I should rebury them. I really didn't know what to do. But a few weeks passed and I visit my new fort and have some fun, and I see other people have come and went, but nothing is disturbed. One day too I visit and my whole fort is ruined and destroyed. I was pretty saddened by that, but I just chalked it up to, are the teenagers my age messing with me, or kids just doing really stupid stuff? My swing was still up though, so I walked over to go and sit on it, and my foot sunk into the ground again. I brushed some leaves away and I saw a plastic bag. I picked it up, and inside of it the same exact Ziploc plastic bags as the other times. But this time inside of it was seen clear as day, and a lot of it. I was so disgusted as soon as I figured it out that I flung it away from me. It wasn't warm or anything, but I'm still in slight liquid form, which was gross. I dug a bit though with my hands and found more family photos than before from the same era, same family. But this time I just felt extremely weirded out and had this gut feeling of just, I don't know, badness. Nothing really made sense, but in the end I just put the stuff back and walked in a different direction of my fort and saw a guy in his 40s by himself walking towards my fort behind me. I instantly felt afraid too because we were hidden from the houses. The majority of the people I saw on the trail were kids my age or younger too, because all there was to do in this place was climb trees and build kids' forts in the woods. But he ducked into my fort and I walked further in the opposite direction. I waited for a while, but it was getting dark, and the only path back to my house was to pass through my fort, and I was afraid that he was still there. I did it anyway, and sure enough, he was still there. And this time he had his willy out, and you can probably guess what he was doing. He made eye contact with me and carried on, and I just ran as fast as I could to my house. I called the police and reported that a man had exposed himself. But other than that, nothing ever really happened. I haven't gone back since. A few years later, I think the area burned down anyway, but they could never pin it on anyone, so they said that it must have just been teenagers smoking cigarettes. I apologize in advance for the incredibly long story, but we've lived in this house for almost 8 years now, and there's just a lot to share. So a neighborhood sits on the original town cemetery from the 1800s. In the 70s, when they built the neighborhood, they only removed the graves that they needed to, but they put in foundations in the sewer system or whatnot. We actually didn't know that, too, until we'd been living here for like 3 or 4 years, but when I found out, it explained a lot of things. While we were still in the process of moving in, too, we hadn't even spent the first night in the house. I heard 2 little kids talking. I heard it clear as day, in fact. A girl probably around 10 or 12, and a little boy who sounded no older than 5, I would guess. I only have 2 brothers, both younger than me, but I'm still older than either of those kids sounded. To be honest, too, it sounded like any younger siblings playing, and because it sounded so normal, I can't even remember what was said. Obviously, too, the first thing that I did was call out to them, and the playing stopped. And after that, I never heard them leave. I searched the house, but nobody was inside. Everyone was in the backyard putting together a swing set. I told my mom what I'd heard, and of course she didn't believe me, so I just dropped it and we moved on. Once later, though, I'm in my room trying to sleep when I roll over and see the reflection of a girl in my TV screen. I realized that I was seeing her back, long, curly blonde hair, and in the 1800s blue dress sort of thing, but somehow in my sleep-deprived brain I thought that it was my own life-size doll and ignored it, and I just went back to sleep. When I woke up, I realized that it definitely was not that, the wrong color, and the doll was facing the TV anyway, so I would have seen the face reflected, not the back of a head that was against the wall. I don't tell my mom, though, because that didn't work last time very well. But after that, stuff starts moving around. Things fall off the stairs that are carpet, and the lights around the house turn off and on at random, too. I can hear people walking around all the time, but still my mother doesn't believe me, which is really stupid because she actually believes in ghosts. In the end, though, I affectionately named the ghost girl Lizzie because it just feels right. I don't know, I'm not that afraid of her or anything, so I named her. But finally, one day, I'm out with my friends doing teenager stuff at like 11 p.m., and my mom calls me. She says, "Tell Lizzie not to scare me." Turns out that she'd gotten up to use the bathroom, and when she went back to bed, she'd seen a black orb hovering over her side of the bed. But when she saw it, it quickly exited via the ceiling, and then she called me. It was along after that that we found the local news articles about our neighborhood and also the cemetery. We also found out that during a flood one year, one particular casket kept popping back up and it had to be moved, and that a lot of the neighborhood have headstones still visible in their yards. We're horrified too, because we definitely noticed some weirdly flat stones out near our garden and only 1 fire or 6 feet from the fruit trees that we planted too. So now we all just accept that we live with a ghost or two. Weird stuff happens all the time. They stop throwing stuff off the stairs, but now, weirdly, they show up in our Xbox Connect, turn sinks on, occasionally knock stuff over, and sometimes I even hear them talking faintly. I haven't seen either of them since the first time, but I know that they're still around. We sort of treat them like family, I suppose, talk to them for snacks, leave toys out to play with. Yeah, life is weird, and new people in the house never take long to notice how weird we are, but also lately I've been seeing a shadow cat hanging around too. We have 2 cats already, but neither of them can disappear through walls, so there's that. But anyway, On one occasion, my friends and I were leaving the house one day. Don't remember where we were going, and Mum comes around the corner swearing that she saw someone walking down the hallway. We were all in the living room and my brothers weren't home, and at the time we had our Xbox set up on a dresser with its own TV, so the kids could play games without taking over the living room and whatnot. And said dresser was right next to the doorway that leads into the hall. Mum says that she thinks she heard the Xbox turn on, and comments on how easy it would probably be for the ghost to turn it on since the button is so sensitive. But we all have a good chuckle at the idea of a ghost girl playing video games, and we just continue at the door. Not even 10 minutes later, Mum calls me to tell me that the Xbox has in fact been turned on and off repeatedly. She's trying to watch TV, and it's starting to freak her out though. But I laugh because of course Lizzie would do that. I hear Mum politely ask her to stop because it's distracting, and the beeping from the console stops for maybe a minute or two before it starts up again. Mum makes me come back early, supposedly because Lizzie likes me and she'll stop if I ask. The Xbox continues to turn on and off at random, albeit every once in a while now for the next week. Now when our consoles or even the TV turns on by itself, we'll always ask her what she wants to watch or play. We never really get any sort of definitive answer though, but I don't know. The whole situation is weird, my family is weird, I know that. But I thought that I would just share this because I wanted to get it off my chest. And if you've made it this far, then thanks for listening. I have a lot of other stories too about our otherworldly guests, I suppose you could call them. But this is long enough already, and yeah, I'll leave it at that. Two summers ago, I was living in a pretty small town with less than 40,000 people. It's where I'm from and where I feel most comfortable. I lived with my boyfriend at the time, our 2 kids, and 2 Rottweilers as well. So my boyfriend would leave a few hours earlier than I did in the mornings, and since we lived right across the street from the elementary school, the kids would just walk to school. One morning after the kids and my boyfriend had left, I was upstairs showering and I heard my 2 Rottweilers just going nuts downstairs. But they were both in canals and I could hear them just going crazy, barking and jumping around in the canals, just making a ton of noise. I then hear footsteps coming up the stairs. And I was immediately alarmed because, again, this is a pretty small town where I grew up. And while it wasn't common for my boyfriend or the kids to come back home, it wasn't beyond comprehension to think that maybe one of them had forgotten something and had to come back to the house. But the dogs were really losing their minds. And it then occurred to me that the dogs don't act like that with the kids or my boyfriend. They'd only really act like that to a stranger. So I open the shower curtain, lean out and yell, "What the hell is going on down there?" And I hear the footsteps stop, then seemingly turn around, run back down the stairs, and the door slammed hard. I was super confused at this point, so I hopped out of the shower in a towel and walked down the stairs to find my front door wide open with the deadbolt in a locked position. So to me it looked like someone tried to lock it, must have panicked or something, slammed the door and just ran, and I guess just didn't notice the door didn't actually close because the deadbolt was out. I peered out the door and just didn't see anything, so I just kind of closed the door and locked it and texted my boyfriend asking if he had stopped at the house, and he said that he hadn't. I checked on the dogs and they were fine, but super high energy and eager to get out of the kennels. I was perplexed, still not that concerned for some reason, and just finished getting ready and went to work and didn't think much about it after that. While I was at work, a family friend stopped in whose kids attended the same school as ours did, and she asks me if I heard that they had put the school in lockdown for 2 or 3 hours that morning, and I had it. She proceeds to tell me, too, that some guy stabbed somebody to death and was loose in her neighborhood, and since we live right by the elementary school and they couldn't find the guy, they put the whole school on lockdown. And at that point, every hair in my body just stood on end. I'm now absolutely certain that this guy was in my home earlier that day, attempting to hide from the police. We didn't always lock our doors, so he was able to just walk in, and he probably wasn't perturbed by my dogs since they were both kennel. But I'm almost positive that it was him in my house that day. I'm also pretty certain that if I hadn't have yelled out from the shower that he would have come upstairs, and who knows what would have happened at that stage. Oh, and they did end up catching this guy hiding under a house in my neighborhood only a few hours after this. I have no recollection of this, but I remember part of my life before and after this story. But I have no memory of my life living in this actual house. This story I know from what my mom and my siblings have told me. So back when I was about 4 or 5 years old, me and my family went to live from Buenos Aires to Saltillo, Mexico. My father had actually just got a big promotion, so he bought a big 3-story house for us. Beautiful and antique as well. And as soon as we moved into that house, I told my mother that I had met 5 boys who were now my friends. As a kid with an active imagination, my mom didn't think much of it. Later on, though, was when she started noticing just strange behavior from my part and my friends. The first thing that she noticed was that my friends were not allowed to come down from the 2nd floor. I would spend hours begging them to please come down and play with me in the 1st floor living room, and I would tell my mom that they couldn't, or they just would get in trouble with the man in the black hat. And after a few more months of this, things started getting even stranger. My mom would sometimes hear children laughing and footsteps on the top floor, and it was at this point that she assumed that maybe my imaginary friends were not as imaginary as she first thought. One night when my father was out of town, I went to sleep with my mom on her bed. Around the middle of the night, I woke her up to tell her that my friends had gotten angry with me, that they were really angry and that they wanted to hurt me. Apparently, I was screaming at my mom to please help me. I was crying, telling her to please help me because they wanted to take me. I was screaming that they were coming for me, that they sent the man in the black hat. Please, I don't want to go. And my mom told me that she grabbed me tight, closed her eyes, and prayed for me just to fall asleep and shut up. But I didn't. And I was telling her to look out the window and see the man. Look at his red eyes. 10 minutes passed, and I was no longer crying. I calmly told her that the man was now in the hallway and that I would be going with him. She went and locked the bedroom door and held me tight with a hand on my mouth and closed her eyes until eventually I just drifted off to sleep. Unfortunately for her, she didn't sleep until daytime, but that morning she called my father and told him that she could no longer live in that house. It took 2 months for us to find a new place to live. But as soon as I left that house, I no longer talked about my friends and apparently just forgot all about them. There are many stories of other things that happened during a stay at that house, but I just wanted to tell you guys that one because it was definitely the most intense for my entire family and me. It was my turn to take my kids trick or treat. The previous year it was my wives, and we trade back and forth every year. My son and daughter are of age 7 and 9. Usually I just stay on the street while my kids go up to different houses to collect candy, but after about half an hour of walking around, we come to one of the more popular hotspots for candy collecting. I made street in the neighborhoods, lots of really cool decorations and animatronics on people's lawns and whatnot. So I became a bit distracted and stopped watching my kids closely. At one point, they came back from a house accompanied by another girl about the same height as my daughter. She was wearing a weird homemade mask, like a cardboard cutout or something. My daughter asked me if she could trick or treat with us, so I said sure, and we carried on together as a group. I didn't know who this girl was, but I figured that she was a friend from school or something. As we continued, I started to notice a large man trailing us, though. He was wearing some sort of an angry cat mask. It was kind of creepy, to be honest, but I thought that maybe he was the father of the girl. so I tried to start up some small chat with him. I said something like, "Nice weather, hey," but he just didn't respond. He just kind of stood there staring at me while our kids went up the stairs to the next house. I tried again, asking, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He nodded but didn't say anything. I figured that he just wasn't in the mood for chatting, so I stopped trying. We carried on for about another 15 minutes until suddenly my kids came up to me and said that they wanted to go home. This surprised me as we hadn't been out for too long and their bags were only really about a third full. In any case, I agreed and waved goodbye at the man in the cat mask and his daughter and started on their way home. The weird thing is that when I glanced back, the man and his daughter were just standing there staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner, and they were still standing there, just not having moved at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me with a confused look on her face, and she said, "She's your friend." I asked her what she meant, and apparently the girl with the cardboard mask approached them and said that she was a friend of mine. She told my daughter that she was too shy to ask me if she could join us to trick or treat, and wanted my daughter to ask me instead. I laughed at this story and replied to my daughter, "Why would you think that she was my friend? I don't have any children friends." What my daughter said next chilled my bones. According to her, when the girl with the cardboard mask approached them for the first time, she wasn't wearing the mask, so they were actually able to see her face. As it turns out, she wasn't a girl at all, but an older woman around my age with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing, though, is that the old woman had started to steal treats from my daughter's bag, apparently when I wasn't looking, and this is why they asked me to go home. The old woman was apparently creeping them out, and they just wanted to get away from her, and I brought my kids home and told my wife what happened. We made sure to check through all the candy, but didn't find anything suspicious or off. We didn't call the police or anything, since nothing really happened, but thinking back, I kind of regret that decision now. I mean, what the heck was that old woman doing? And who the hell was that man that was following us around? I don't think I'll ever know, but I just think that it's sick that there are people out there on Halloween hiding behind masks, pretending to be children, and just doing weird things like this. I lived in an old house as a kid until I was 8. It's like 110 years old by now, but my parents told me the ghosts started appearing after I was born. My crib was in their bedroom. My mom would wake up to him giggling and cooing a lot like I was playing with someone. Other times I'd be sound asleep, but my crib would be rocking back and forth, and on 3 separate occasions, she said that she saw a woman in a nice white dress standing over my crib. My dad frequently saw her going up or down the spiral staircase that led to the room upstairs, or just standing at the top of the near the balcony looking down at him while he watched TV. When I asked my sister about it, she was reluctant to talk about it, but she said that she'd actually seen her. We also heard footsteps in the attic that would stop the second the light was turned on, and my dad investigated a few times, but never found anything. Except that sometimes the attic light was on when he was absolutely positive that it was off when he went to sleep, but you could see the light from under the doorway. I only really remember seeing her once, but that's another story entirely. I just sort of chalked it up as something weird my whole family experienced, and never really thought about it much after we moved. None of us ever had a bad vibe from her, and she wasn't scary, so we lived with it for about 8 years. So flash forward to me being a freshman in high school. I'm in earth science class talking to a girl that I thought was cute. I got to the "so where do you live around here" part of the conversation, and she said, "Old Town," and the town name near the railroad tracks. And I said, "Oh really, that's neat. I used to live in Old Town too, on so-and-so street." She says, "Really, that's where I live, the white one with the green shutters." And I was like, "No way," I'm kind of amazed, and I say, "With the plum tree out front and the white picket fence with the shed in the backyard." She nods, and I ask her, "Have you seen her?" I kid you not, My response sent a chill down my spine, and immediately I had goosebumps. She says, "You mean the lady in the white dress?" Yes. I was floored. I just kept thinking, it's like a double-blind study. There's no way that she could have known what I meant. And she gave me an accurate description when I didn't even say the word ghost or anything. I can tell you that it honestly changed me after that day. I went from being a sort of a jock kid who wore American Eagle stuff, well, when it was cool for youngsters, to listening to Black Sabbath and Pink Floyd. And quite frankly, my whole attitude on life just changed. I became a lot more relaxed and was open to new ideas, whereas I had a "this is what's real and this is what isn't" kind of attitude beforehand. There is a little more to this story because obviously we spoke a bit, but I'll leave that for another post. And for now, I hope you enjoyed that story. It happened a couple of years ago when I was living abroad. I had just got off the night shift and was waiting at the bus stop at around 6 a.m. It was just starting to get bright out, and the area that I worked in was the party city in this country. So it was pretty crowded with people just finishing their nights out. I noticed a girl that was pretty drunk, just sitting at the door of the shop beside the bus stop. Some guy was with her and had his arm around her shoulders, but I could tell that something just wasn't right. But when anyone passing by and not paying attention, they would easily have passed as just a couple. I tried to act casual and must have beside them and pretended to be looking at my phone while trying to assess the situation. He nodded at me and tightened his grip on her and started to whisper in her ear. The girl looked really uncomfortable, but she was also too drunk to actually move away or say anything. She was heavily slurring her words. This went on for a couple more minutes. He was whispering in her ear as well and constantly surveying the area, smiling to himself that nobody seemed to have noticed. I had about 4 minutes until the bus came, and that bad feeling in my stomach was growing worse, so I said, "Screw it, I need to do something now." I leaned over to the girl and I said, "Hey, is this your boyfriend?" The man stared me down and said yes, but I ignored his glare and I asked the girl again. And at this, she started crying and shook her head no. I asked her if she knew him or never met him. Again, she shook her head and said no. The man became visibly frustrated and insisted that they knew each other. I asked the girl if she was going to my area. She nodded yes, so I told her that I would bring her there, and I lifted her up. At this point, the dude rolled his eyes and started cursing at me. I held his gaze, but I was terrified on the inside because he could have got on the bus and followed us. Thankfully, though, when the bus pulled up, he just turned and walked away. I'm guessing this was because a few people were there waiting to get on, and he didn't want to cause a scene. I sat beside the girl on the bus, which was about a 20-minute drive. She was still quite drunk and slurring her words at this stage, but from what I could piece together, she had lost her friends, and her phone died. And this man started talking to her when she left the club to find them, and he kept insisting on bringing her to his house. When we got to our stop, I walked her home and made sure that she got in okay, and she asked me to take a number so that she could talk to me when she was sober. We chatted a few times since then, but she said that she was extremely thankful that I had noticed something was up, because apparently when she left the club, she was stumbling about, and this guy came out of nowhere and started offering help to her, putting his arm around her so that she could walk, etc. He was telling her things like he was going to take her back to his house and have fun with her. She said that she was terrified, but too drunk to get the words out to call for help. When I had sat beside them too, I noticed that he was whispering in her ear to shut up and not say anything. It's also worth noting too that this guy was a 100% sober, which means that this wasn't just a drunk person trying to get an easy hookup. The place this happened is in a party city, as I said, so unfortunately it's likely that this kind of thing happens all the time, and a lot of guys could be getting away with this type of behavior. If you're ever in a situation like this and you feel like you can help someone in distress, please don't hesitate. If you don't feel comfortable approaching someone yourself, you can call the cops too, and if you're the victim in this situation, do your best to call out to passerbyers for help. Also, always be aware of your surroundings and be safe. Make sure your friends and family know exactly where you are and who you're with as well, because quite honestly, this girl was lucky.